What was the stupidest thing you've done just to show you could do it? I jumped illegally over the China-Myanmar border and back again. Well, this blew up. This was in 2002. I was in China legally in the town of Ruili, Yunnan province. Across a small stream and two thin strings of barbed wire was the city of Muse, White Elephant City, Myanmar, which was closed to foreigners at the time. A group of users were smoking in the thick bushes growing near the border and invited me over for a chat. I saw no border guards were within line of sight to me, so I did. We had an interesting chat in a mixture of Chinese and English. Later, I wandered into the closest narrow street lined with dilapidated white wooden buildings with bearded men in sarongs wandering around. I bought a Burmese noodle dish, no alcohol available in that state. Then I hightailed it back to the same crossing spot and over about 90 minutes after I first went over. Ruili, China is, or at least was, a lawless borderland with all the vices that lawless border towns typically attract. My crossing was the least of the local authorities' worries. I wouldn't repeat it or recommend it to anyone, though. Alright, so he basically went on a noodle run to Myanmar. Talk about a unique lunch break. Story 2. Parents put a curfew on the computer when I was around 12 during summer break. No gaming from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. A reasonable person would go to bed at 10:30 and wake up at 7 to play, right? 12-year-old me would just stay up until 6 a.m., woke up my parents and played until noon, then slept until dinner. Rinse and repeat for a few days until my parents got sick of waking up at 6 a.m., then I went back to gaming until like 2 a.m. To answer some recurring questions, they physically locked the computer room. I could not get access to the room without picking or breaking the lock, and I wasn't going to do that. I don't recall the game exactly. My gut feeling is survival project, though. Yes, I understand your parents and or you have just changed the opening time to 8 a.m. or noon or 8 p.m., but my parents taught us to stick to our word. If a contract between parties was made, it couldn't be changed without agreement from both parties or extenuating circumstances. An oversight on someone's part isn't enough. It cuts both ways. If we made a promise to our parents, we were expected to uphold it as well. Story 3. There comes a point in every intoxicated man's life where he finds himself standing on the edge of a precipice, apartment building roof, staring into the distance at glory, a freaking tree, separated from him by a challenge, a 3-story fall. The weak man will shrug his shoulders, slink back to safety, and carry on with his night as if he never glimpsed what could have been. But the bold, stupid man will look across the chasm and see the greatness that awaits him on the other side. He will stride to the edge, hand off the extra reserve of courage, beer, that he no longer needs for what must be done. He will stare into the heavens and proclaim into the night, I can jump that far. Yeah, turns out that I could not jump that far. At least he had the courage to try, right? How many of us could actually say that, even if courage was mostly liquid, and yeah, I wouldn't do it. Story 4. Punched a giant plate glass window out of a jewelry shop in Palm Springs when I was 21, and all I remember is seeing my buddies sprinting away when the store alarm started blaring. My other friend picked me up in front of the store and he got me to a hospital and into ICU. When the emergency room doctor pulled out a 6-inch needle, I passed out cold. Woke up about 12 hours later with a throbbing headache, bandages on hand. Finals started the next week and I couldn't write with my left hand, so I had to use my right. Also took me a good year to get my dexterity back to play guitar. Totally stupid move on my part. Story 5. When I was in college, I got intoxicated one night and punched a pint glass. It ended up hurting my finger really badly. Went to the bathroom and ran it underwater. I didn't know what to do and was too intoxicated to try to deal with it. So I just wrapped my hand in a towel and tried to go to sleep. Woke up to knocking at my door and it ended up being security. He followed a trail of red liquid from the bathroom to my room and wanted to make sure I was all right. I showed him my finger and he was like, come on, you gotta get to the hospital. Dude was a bro and drove me there even though it was like 3 a.m. Saw a doctor and he had to give me a bunch of stitches. He said I was very lucky because if it was just a tiny bit deeper, I would have probably done permanent damage and lost mobility of the finger. Now I have this scar on my finger shaped like a Nike swoosh to remind me not to be stupid and try to fight glass. Story 6. In college, the choir I worked for sent out an invitation for a sweats-only party. This was clearly intended to mean comfy, casual dress, but a rumor got started that it meant you were only supposed to wear sweatpants, no shirt. The leader of the club issued a clarification, but since we were all college students, she also found it funny to say, you absolutely can wear shirts to the party, but you don't have to. I joked to another friend that if it was optional, I was definitely coming without anything on. A freshman boy overheard and interrupted to tell us, "No, you're not allowed to do that. Girls can't walk around with no shirts on," in a tone that strongly suggested he felt our mortal souls should be forfeit if we tried. Mind you, he wasn't in any kind of leadership position, and we were both seniors who belonged to the executive board of this organization. So he was trying to boss us around just because it's a man's world? The two of us went without any top to the party in a Massachusetts winter, pretty much froze us, but we put him in his place. Story 7. Both times were attempts to impress a lady. First, I picked up a 2 to 3 foot long gopher snake. I successfully grabbed it, but it also bit me quite hard. The second incident still gives me anxiety sometimes. I was very intoxicated with a girl I really liked, and somehow the topic of climbing this parking garage came up. I felt the need to prove to everyone we were with that it was possible to climb the building using a single pipe on the side. Without warning, I immediately started climbing and was already a floor up before my friends could stop me. I then proceeded to climb all 5 stories using the wall and the pipe. When I reached the top, everyone I was with was freaking out. My best friend then slapped me hard. Good times, but that could have been very dangerous with a totally different ending. Story 8. I'm a small 5'3" woman. I was weightlifting at my campus gym one day, and my goal at the time was to finally break 200 pounds in my squat. I was squatting 185 and was taking a small break in between sets. Then some scrawny man comes over and condescendingly says he'll help me take all that weight off if I want to use the squat rack. I guess he assumed I couldn't possibly lift that much and someone just left their weight on and left. My coach taught me that if you can still talk during a workout, then you obviously aren't working hard enough, so I said nothing. But I put on another 10 pounds on each side of the bench and proceeded to do another set. So I finally hit my goal and was squatting 205. He looked very uncomfortable and walked away, didn't talk to me for the rest of my workout. I told my siblings after, and my sisters congratulated me, but one of my brothers said I was stupid and would have hurt myself just to one-up some guy at the gym. Totally worth it, though. Story 9. Ate around 50 rolls of sushi at an all-you-can-eat sushi place. It was one of my first lunch outings with coworkers at my very first full-time job, and they took me to an all-you-can-eat sushi buffet. I had the brilliant idea of buying a whole bunch of sushi so I could share. I didn't realize until after I was brought this massive plate of rolls that the buffet didn't allow you to share. What you ordered, you had to eat, and they watched to make sure you did. Also, if you didn't eat everything off your plate, you had to pay $1.50 for each roll uneaten. So after a while, everyone finished their food, and I was left with about 35 or so rolls, and my manager asked if I thought I would be able to finish. I had this weird shot of anxiety at that moment that I would appear weak in front of my new coworkers if I didn't. And that's where I had this second brilliant idea of impressing everyone with my newfound competitive level eating prowess, and pretty much power ate through a disgusting amount of sushi in about 10 minutes. Suffice to say, the needless display of dominance worked. I had established my title in the group as the one who eats grotesque amounts of food. I felt like this expectation I was supposed to meet every now and then when we would go out to eat lunch at a buffet. So, for example, we'd go to an Indian buffet once a week or so, and I'd have 3 or 4 heaping plates of food. In 2 months, I had put on almost 40 pounds, and I felt absolutely horrible. Thankfully, over time, I was able to build a genuine form of confidence with my coworkers. The pressure of being the competitive eater of lunchtime waned, and I was able to lose most of the weight I put on. But it was one of the worst things I had ever done to my body for the sake of getting people to like me. Story 10. When I was 18, I'm 34 now, I went from not exercising at all, not walking at all, not doing any kind of physical activity in my entire life, to an exhausting 14-mile hike with an altitude gain of 3,000 meters or so in one day, and do it the way back to the next day, 28 miles in 24 hours, just because I told this friend who was an avid hiker that it wasn't a big deal to hike any mountain. Somehow I managed to go ahead of the group to hide from him how exhausted I was, ran out of water, almost collapsed, couldn't handle the muscle pain while sleeping. When going back down the mountain, all I thought while on the trail was, how did I get myself into this, and that I was never going to do something like this again. In the end, I arrived back home, unable to walk, to sit, or to stand, having a hard time walking and endless muscle pains. But life changes us. When I recovered months or weeks later, I started hiking and haven't stopped since back then, still not exercising at all. And yes, I keep asking myself why and saying I won't do it again while on a trail, to just get back home and plan the next hike. Story 11. I had a mark on my melons when I was a teenager. I have massive melons, unfortunately, and something I did for no reason at all was just, bite it. It didn't feel good. It felt awful, but I was a stupid teenager and I thought it was so weird. My melons were so huge I could put a bite of one in my mouth, so sue me. Anyways, my mom saw the bite mark on my chest and immediately thought I was having intimacy and a guy must have had his way with me. And to her credit, that's kind of what happened with my older sister when she was my age at the time. So she demanded to know who I was seeing and wouldn't hear that it was me who bit it, so I decided words wouldn't cut it and I just put it in my mouth the exact same way in front of my mom. She gave me this look of confusion, horror, embarrassment, and even more confusion, then pushed me and said, "Get that out of your mouth," and ended the conversation very quickly. I don't think she talked to me the rest of the day, LMAO. Story 12. In my freshman year of high school, my friends and I were waiting for the bus. One of my friends, who was taking extra tech classes to become a vet and was very passionate about animals, reached into her bag and realized she had a baggie full of dog treats. She brought them with her out of habit, as she usually went to the tech place that day. She jokingly offered them to me since I was kind of the food trash can of the group. I said sure, with a laugh, and actually ate the entire baggie of treats while we waited for the bus. My friends were laughing and saying, "What the?" Surprisingly, they weren't terrible. They tasted like unflavored goldfish crackers with a strong aftertaste of meat of unknown origin. Story 13. When I was in elementary school, my class went on a campout at a lodge in the mountains. We were having burritos for dinner at the cafeteria, and they somewhat stupidly let kids have full access to hot sauce. My friend told me he'd call me boss if I put the whole bottle of hot sauce on my burrito, and being the stupid kid I was, I did. So eventually all the kids in my grade stranded around me while I wolfed down this nuclear bomb of a burrito and I finished. My mouth was on fire. I drank too many cartons of milk and felt better. This isn't even where the problem started. The next day, we were supposed to go sledding and snowboarding down the mountain, but I woke up with a burn in my stomach. Couldn't move, but I somehow managed to get to the bathroom. A few words to describe how this felt: fire in the hole. Even after taking a massive one, I didn't feel better, and I had to miss out on the sledding and snowboarding. Story 14. This isn't something I've done, but what my dad did. When he was a teenager, he worked as a busboy at a local restaurant that was right on the bank of a large river. It's important to note that this river had a bridge across it relatively close to the restaurant. It was a big bridge. I'm not sure the height. I'd have to ask to get it right, but I believe it's around 40 to 50 feet above the water, and you weren't allowed to jump off the bridge for obvious safety reasons. So one day my dad was working and he got to talking with one of the customers who commented on the bridge. He says something along the lines of, "Does anyone ever jump off of that bridge?" To which my dad responds with something like, "Yeah, some kids do, but people tend to freak out." The customer thinks my dad is pulling his leg, though, so naturally he doubts him, saying, "I bet you won't jump off that bridge right now." My dad, being the crazy teenager that he is or was, proceeds to take off his apron, walk out of the restaurant, and goes and jumps off the bridge. He walks back into the restaurant, soaking wet, and just shrugs off the whole restaurant staring at him. The story doesn't end there, though. A year or two later, my dad, serving tables at the same restaurant, strikes a conversation with a younger adult. He asked if they had been there before, and they said, "Yes, the last time I was here, some server jumped off the bridge." My dad goes to tell the customer that it was him, but he doesn't believe that coincidence. He tells my dad to prove it by jumping off the bridge again. My dad, not wanting to disappoint, takes off his apron, walks out the restaurant, and goes and jumps off the bridge. When he walks in, the customer shouts, "It was you!" in disbelief. Story 15. Not me, but my husband. My husband kept saying his bum hurt and there was something very wrong with it. I kept begging him to show it to me, but he wouldn't. I'm also a nurse. So the next day, it had gotten much worse. Here, he had a giant hemorrhoid. I asked him how he thinks he got this, and he said he hasn't a clue. I run to Walmart to buy $50 worth of product just to see if any of it will work. After some time, it healed up and went back in. Weeks later, I went to a family barbecue, and one of his bowling buddies said, "Hey, how did your husband like the ghost pepper he ate at bowling a while ago?" I answered back, "What ghost pepper?" Shockingly, the friend told me that he brought back some ghost peppers from a holiday and brought some to bowling. He bet anyone to eat it for $50, but no one would, so he raised it to $100. My husband went over, took the pepper, ate it, and then grabbed the $100 and walked away, not knowing he'd pay a horrible price much later. I asked him about it, and he said he forgot all about doing that. Story 16. There are these special events in the Hypixel server in Minecraft where if you collect 7 special dishes from fishing, you get a limited time item. Problem, it takes about 2 hours to get one, so a bit of grinding. My friend says he'll be off once he catches one, and he caught one in 2 hours and went to sleep. I did say I was going to sleep after I got one too. He woke up to me, still online, at 12 p.m., 1 a.m. when he left, still fishing for that one special fish, completely luck-based. He said I should get some sleep. I said no, and that I need to do this because I need to at least keep a word. He fished with me for 5 hours after that and caught like 3 more before I finally caught my first after 16 hours of fishing. I fished twice as many than him, and he almost completed the challenge for the item. I was still 1 of 7. I'm currently building up strength to try to attempt to get it because I want the item, but my sanity was drained and regained over time, so I'll do it in a couple of weeks. Story 17. One time I saw my dog jump from the top of our very high raised garden to the steps below and was like, hey, if he could do that, I can. In the way of my jump, there was a bush and a short of wall of bricks right in front of the cement. I frickin' closed my eyes and jumped, missed, and landed on my left pinky toe. Went to school the next day because the day before that, the day I jumped, was the last day of summer vacation. Wobbled around the school the entire day, thinking that I just bruised my toe when I had a hard time fitting my foot into my shoe that morning. After school, we went to the doctor and it turned out I had severely broken my toe and walking on it all day made it worse. I spent the next year in crutches. Story 18. This isn't all that impressive, but I don't do stupid things very often. After the AP tests in high school, one of my friends' AP classes was having a party day where they were just going to eat food and watch a movie. My friend brought in some ridiculously hot sauce. I wish I could remember where he got it. My friends in high school knew I loved hot food, so this friend made a bet with me, $10 for me to stop by his class between my classes, dip a tortilla chip in the hot sauce, and eat it. Sounds really simple, but it was seriously hot. Hot like if you smelled it with your eyes, it would start to water. He just wanted me to dip it, take a triangle tortilla chip, dip the corner in a good amount, and eat it. I didn't want there to be any question, though, so I wanted to overdo it. I searched for a chip that was rolled up so I could scoop it out, and then I stopped when I saw a bag of Tostito scoops on the counter. I found the biggest chip I could, dipped the chip in like a ladle, and ate the whole thing in one bite. I was nearly late to class, so I had to leave right after I ate the chip. I sat in my English class and my mouth felt like it was literally on fire for what seemed like hours, but couldn't have been more than like 15 minutes. My eyes watering and nose running the whole time while I'm watching, quote unquote, reading Hamlet. Friend gave me the money on the bus after school. Totally worth it though. Story 19. Was on a camping trip with a bunch of friends in high school. 4 of us climbed up a sheer cliff with a bunch of cactus about 150 feet high without any safety gear in Texas. One guy was up ahead going up. His hand landed on a small cactus as we scaled the cliff. He screamed and flailed a bit, dislodging a huge rock that went whizzing by my head, missing it about like a foot. Could have literally fallen to my demise and be nothing but a smear on the crags below had it hit. After we got to the top, we had no idea how to get down, so we hiked for an hour to find better grounds. Problem was, our camp was across a river. It was November, and this was all before cell phones. My friends didn't want to jump into the freezing river. I jumped in anyways and said, I'll go back to get a boat. One other person followed me. Made it halfway across and started to feel my energy drain away and was struggling to kick. My other friend was losing energy as well. Lucky for us, some other people back at the camp were out canoeing around, and we latched on the side for dear life while they paddled us back to the camp and ferried others over. Had hypothermia and uncontrollable shaking for hours by the fire. And if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 20. Ate a ghost pepper. I absolutely love spicy foods and have somewhat of a tolerance for the really hot stuff. Well, while visiting the rents, my dad was telling me about how hot the ghost pepper was, and I jokingly said, oh, I'd love to try one. That'd be an experience. Well, this man walks into the kitchen and back out onto the patio about 10 seconds later and says, I knew you were going to say that, so I bought one when I was at the store. Obviously, I'm not going to look like a wuss and witch out of eating it in front of my dad, so naturally I ate it. Little did I know how hot they were. The pain is almost unbearable. It literally feels like someone lit a propane torch and shoved it down your throat. I drank probably half a gallon of milk and probably lost an additional 5 pounds from sweating. 0 out of 10 would not recommend. Story 21. When I was younger, I drank an incredible amount of water every day. About 10 water bottles and a few glasses each day was normal. One day at a hibachi restaurant, I wanted to challenge myself. I pestered my sister to bet me $5 on how many full glasses of water I could down at the restaurant since it would be multiple courses and take quite a while. She refused and told me to just do it anyway, but I convinced her to bet 25 cents just for the principle. We settled on 8.5 glasses as the mark to beat. I won the bet, but it ruined my night. My stomach felt like it was going to burst like a cola can in the freezer until the morning. Story 22. When I was about 8 or 9, I wanted to prove to my younger siblings that I was super fast. While they knew I ran faster than them, they said it didn't count because I was older and had longer legs. Then I told them I could take cheese out of a mouse trap using my fingers, and they knew how fast mice were and would still get caught in the trap, so we were pumped to see this. I figured it must be super easy to do since my parents put the cheese in it the first place, right? I was so wrong, and my parents woke up to me screaming and had to pull it off my fingers with one holding my arm still because I kept trying to just shake it off, ended up losing a fingernail but no real damage. That was the end of my parents sleeping in on the weekend for a few years again and the start of my lifelong fear of mouse traps. Story 23. I was in 8th grade and it was at lunch. All my friends were messing with the food I didn't finish on my tray. They had the great idea to grab the mayo packet from my tray and put it all in the half-full carton of chocolate milk on my tray, and put 5 goldfish in my milk, add carrots, and something else I forgot about. Anyways, one of my friends said if I drank all of that, he'd give me $5. And he pulled the $5 from his pocket and showed me. By the way, the girl I had a crush on was sitting close by and looking at all of us talking about it. I didn't want the $5, I just wanted to impress my crush. Don't know how that would impress her, but at the time I thought it would. So I said, nah, I'll drink it for free, and chugged the carton of nasty fluids. I almost threw up drinking it. When I looked over at my crush, she was laughing, but I think she was laughing at me and not with me. It wasn't worth it in the end. Story 24. I had an assignment in class where we had to say how 2 things were connected using words given and context from a documentary. Now, the context you really need is I was known for being insanely stubborn and passive-aggressive. Teachers told me that daily, plus the next class was lunch. The teacher hands me the test and I say, I can find the connection between anything easy. And she responded, then this should be no issue for you. I proceeded to basically challenge myself to find the connection between every single pair via food, which wasn't even an option. I failed the test, but during lunch, I walked past my teacher for that class talking with my Spanish teacher while they ate, and she was laughing as she told him about my test. You must have been so hungry. Nope, I just wanted to prove I could. Worth it. Story 25. Was camping at a lake near where I live when I was 20 with a couple of guy friends and a bunch of chicks. I mentioned bunch of chicks because I probably wouldn't have done it if there weren't so many. We were sitting around a campfire and obviously been drinking a bit, and one of my friends chewing tobacco, his can's lids fell into the fire. One of the girls promptly called me and my friends wuss if none of us wore it as a brand when they bought it out of the fire. All my friends said no, but these girls kept on about how we were all wusses, so I decided to do it. Kept it on there for a good 20 to 30 seconds, stood up, poured whiskey on it, and called it good. Had a nice letter, perfect brand and circle on my back for about a year and a half. Now it's almost unnoticeable. Stupid for sure, lol. Story 26. At a trivia night I used to attend a decade ago, there was a round called Sink or Swim. You earned 1 point for correctly guessing whether a random item of the week would sink or swim in a jug of water. Beer was forbidden as it would be considered prompting irresponsible drinking. For a bonus point, you could volunteer to scull the jug, that is, drink its entire contents quickly with the item inside. I earned numerous bonus points even when our team was significantly ahead or hopelessly behind. The trivia host quickly realized my willingness to scull anything, and the challenges escalated rapidly. This included races against other contestants, and even wearing less clothing than I should have ever been seen in. Here are some of the more memorable items. A whole dim sum, steamed, then fried, swallowed whole, that caused about 4 days of severe stomach pain. 5 grams of salt. I foolishly bit into a chunk of undissolved salt at the end. 200 grams of hot chili powder. It burned going down, coming up, and everything in between. And the winner? Dog food. It didn't taste terrible, but the smell was horrendous. I managed to keep it down, but it severely constipated me for a week, eventually requiring hospitalization and an IV drip as I couldn't keep any food or drink down. I could do it, so I did. Story 27. I'm a 55-year-old male. Earlier this year, I fought in my first amateur cage match at 145 pounds, about 66 kilograms, against a 155-pound, 70-kilogram male with a 2-to-1 record. I trained hard for this fight, focusing on both cardio and fighting techniques. I had a plan to finish the fight within 10 seconds. Then the bell rang, and I suddenly realized I was in a real fight. I thought, holy cow, how did I get myself into this situation? But I stuck to my plan and attacked first. I knocked him down to his knees, pounced on him, and started punching him. I kept punching, expecting the referee to stop the fight, but he didn't. My opponent started to get back up. My mind panicked. This is all over, I've lost, and I lost focus. After that, the fight is a blur. I eventually tapped out. As I was standing up, I noticed my nose was wounded. I didn't remember when he hit me there. So yes, I proved to myself that I could do it, but ultimately, I got my back handed to me. Story 28. In my hometown, there are a bunch of cool spots to go cliff jumping. Most are pretty tame and accessible, and I went to one with a couple of friends a few summers ago. The main spot to jump in the river is only 10 or 15 feet high, and I did that with a couple of my friends. Two of my friends had really wanted to try the extreme jump at this spot, which is roughly 80 feet above the water. They aren't extreme athletes, so I was pretty surprised. They both did it and said it was a lot of fun. Then they both tried to get me to do it. I'm a pretty mellow person, so no one expected me to, and everyone else in our group was like, yeah, he would never. Now, I should say my thought process was more like, these guys did it and had fun, so it must be safe. Then I must prove myself to the world, but I was definitely motivated by everyone assuming I wouldn't do it. So I walk up the trail that rises to the top of the cliff and I make myself just count down a jump. It was terrifying. Usually, when you jump into water, you immediately just kind of end up underwater, but because it was so high, I actually had multiple moments of cognitive thought, which mostly consisted of, I'm an idiot, aren't I? And what do I do now? Apparently, what I decided to do was look down at the last second. My whole body was in pain and I was hyperventilating hard as I swam toward the shore. Everyone felt super bad, but after a bit, I mostly felt okay. That night, it turned out I got a concussion. Definitely learned a lesson that day. Unfortunately, it turns out if my friends jumped off of a cliff, I would follow them, but it makes for a good story. Story 29. Chug a whole bottle of strawberry Smirnoff vodka. Me and my roommates at the time came up with a drinking game by playing MLB The Show. Basically, if you get a hit or a run, the other person drinks, and if you strike out, you drink. Not a hard concept at all, but me and one of my roommates were drinking beer, the other was drinking Smirnoff vodka. He decided that instead of playing by those rules, that he would just take a shot at every inning. We were in the fourth inning, which means he had 4 shots, and this man starts going wild like he's belligerently intoxicated. So to prove a point to this man, I told him I could down the rest of his bottle and be less intoxicated than his belligerent self. I chugged the whole bottle essentially, and I don't remember anything about 20 minutes after that. I fell down in the bathroom and had to be helped to bed by my friends, and I woke up with a mess everywhere. Amazing I didn't pass away from it. 10 out of 10, do not recommend. Story 30. I was about 4 years old and my grandfather was making something with buttermilk. I saw it in his hand and I cried and screamed and begged to have some. He kept saying, no, you won't like it. But I persisted. He finally poured me an entire glass. I took one swig and I'm sure he could see the disgust on my face because he looked like he had won. I stared at him right in his eyes as I chugged the entire glass. And that is how you teach a child a valuable lesson about stubbornness and the importance of finishing what you start. Story 31. As teenagers with access to a boat, drinks, and bad ideas, we had some crazy times out at the lake. One of the things we would do is to see who could stay holding on to the smallest tube the longest. Without a wide base, that tube would topple with even the slightest change in direction. Our one buddy was going to prove he was the best. The driver gunned the boat but didn't make any turns for a while and instead gained speed. Then they made a short, easy turn to the right and slowed down just a bit. Before our tube rider could react, the throttle was slammed back down and a hard left turn was coming. My buddy held on for pride, I'd say dear life, but they should have let go much earlier. He survived the first 2 rolls, but eventually physics took over. He then proceeded to set the course record for how many times a human body can skip like a rock across the surface. We pulled him aboard, battered, sore, but alive. The following week, he updated us that he got an infection from his water enema that he was now on antibiotics. Story 32. Throwaway cause, yeah, my friend bet me I couldn't steal an ancient Roman marble engraving from downtown Rome, so I did. Unsolicited story, it was my last night in Rome at a study abroad program in college. I was 20 and we had gone out as a group to celebrate and get smashed. As we're stumbling back to our residence, my friend says, dude, I wish I had an actual piece of Roman marble as a souvenir. As we passed a barbed wire fenced archaeological site in downtown Rome, sloshed conversation ensues and me being young, intoxicated, American, and jacked up on peer pressure to show off in front of my cute classmates, and I jumped the fence to grab a piece of Roman history. At this point, everything blurs and I scramble over the barbed fence, grab the most ornate piece of marble I could find, and hop back over to the street, only with half of my shirt as it got caught on the barbed fence on my way back. Everyone was impressed though, and it was cool. I borrowed my friend's jacket and smuggled the marble engraving back in my torn-up shirt. I ended up leaving the engraving in Italy though. Next morning, we all parted ways and I went to visit the north of the country. My last stop was in Venice, and on my last night, I felt too guilty about keeping this piece of Italian history for my own stupidity. Also, it weighed like 15 pounds and I was worried that I would get crap for it at customs because it was clearly not from a tourist shop. So I put the marble piece in my backpack and dropped it into the canal behind my hotel. Story 33. I was in a party after a comedy day. I asked a comedian who hosted it about another comedian that I'd like to take a picture with him. Then he responded sarcastically, "There are many others in the room. Why don't you just go take a picture with them?" There was Costas, particularly go and take one. Nah, I responded, "I don't want him. I want George." Okay. Then he responded back and go tell Costas that you don't want to take a picture with him and you want George. It sounded like a dare, so without even thinking, I went to his table and told him exactly that. He didn't give any care and answered something like, "Yeah, good for you." I went back to host's table and told him, and he sarcastically responded again, and of course, he didn't care at all. I felt like an idiot and left the table half embarrassed, half disappointed in myself. Story 34. I asked my German teacher if I could eat my apple during class, and I knew she was going to say no, so I stuck the entire apple in my mouth. She started laughing and said, "No, spit it out." I then spent the next 15 minutes trying to prove I could eat the whole apple without taking it out of my mouth. This wasn't a small apple, it was medium to large. Juice was dripping down my chin, and the whole class was having a great time watching me. I couldn't stop laughing even with the apple still in my mouth. The hardest part was the beginning. It was difficult to take a few small bites to get started, but I eventually did it. The teacher kept telling me to spit it out because she was worried. She even then sent me to the bathroom to get tissues, but I came back wiping my mouth and struggling to eat the apple. I finally finished it, and to this day, that was still my favorite German lesson. I even repeated this in the cafeteria and at my neighbor's house afterward just to prove I could do it. Story 35. My brothers and I bought ninja diversion bombs from the ice cream man for 50 cents each. They came in small silver packages and basically exploded when you stepped on them, making a loud noise. In case you didn't know, ninjas were quite popular in the 90s. Using them around the house became boring, so we tried to think of a place to use them to scare people. We hadn't decided on a location, but one evening, I was with my mom and we were picking up my brothers from Sunday school. My mom pulled up front and asked me to run in and get them. I brought the ninja bombs with me. I went inside and got my brothers, and we were standing outside the front door where everyone gathered afterward. It was relatively dark, and I placed the bombs on the ground in front of me. My brothers' faces turned to disbelief. We exchanged a look, wondering who would do it. Well, I did. I stepped on them and threw them into the middle of a small crowd. Now, these ninja bombs had like an 8-second delay, so we had about 8 seconds to escape, which we did. I ran like the wind, not saying a word, just trying to reach the getaway car. My brothers, on the other hand, were screaming at the top of their lungs, "It's going to blow!" We heard a couple of distant noises and quickly ran to the car with my mom completely unaware of what had happened. Nothing else came of it, and we're still at large. And you can still find 8-second delay ninja bombs at Karate Mart. Story 36. As kids, we used to jump from and to pieces of ocean ice, often using a smaller piece as a stepping stone between the larger, more stable ones. I jumped onto a triangular piece that had rolled over and was wet and very slippery. I fell into the ice-cold ocean and would have drowned if a classmate hadn't pulled me onto a stable piece of ice. Another time, we were intoxicated at a concert, and a friend found a stapler that the concert organizers had left behind after putting up posters. He said, "Want me to staple you?" And I was like, "Why not?" He stapled my t-shirt and pulled the t-shirt to show that it was indeed stapled. We laughed it off and I pulled the staple out. It didn't hurt. Intoxicated shenanigans, am I right? Story 37. I grew up in a religious household and was always told I wasn't much of a party animal. One night I went to a barbecue with a friend and she gave me some special brownies as a gift. When I came home, my roommate saw what I had and laughed, saying, "Girl, come on, you're not going to try those, are you? You're way too straight-laced." I looked her right in the eyes and said, "Oh yeah? Watch me." The next thing I knew, I had shoved all 3 brownies in my mouth and swallowed them whole. And let's just say the taste was unpleasant. My roommate stared at me, speechless. "What the heck did you just do?" she finally blurted out. And the effects hit me hard and fast. I had bizarre hallucinations, mixing up holidays, Thanksgiving with Jesus at the Passover table, and even tried to share the brownies with imaginary people. Needless to say, the rest of the night was a blur. I slept for a full day, woke up feeling awful, and ended up retching. I was basically spiked for 4 days straight and had to call in sick to work. That experience was enough to turn me off completely. In hindsight, my friend should have warned me that I should only eat half a brownie. Let's just say I learned a valuable lesson the hard way. While I'm not proud of the whole ordeal, I will admit that I did get more sleep in those 4 days than I ever had in my entire life. Plus, for a brief moment, I felt a deep connection to the music I was listening to, but overall, it was a wild ride that I would not recommend. Story 38. Not me, but one of my former coworkers told us about the time he ate a tub of butter on a dare. He made it about halfway through and had to retch up. For the next month, the smell of butter made him gag, and when he perspired, he could still smell it. You'd think he'd learn, but he attempted the butter challenge a second time. This time, he paced himself and actually finished the whole thing. He said the screw up, though, was eating it before having to catch a train. While he was waiting, his heart was racing and he felt so amped up. He did push ups and jumping jacks at Penn Station. And if any of these stories got to you, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.